Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Asch. Welcome to today's episode of the Capstone Conversation. I am your host, Jared Asch. Last week, we talked about trends in government tech. Now we're going to take a new spin on it, and we're going to look at K-12 tech. What is happening in our education? How can we get our students prepared? What should school administrators and teachers know? Today, I am joined by two experts, Dr. Michael Conner, head of Agile Evolutionary and CIO in residence for the District Administrator Leadership Institute, and Jacob Kantor of K-12 Consulting, an education tech client consultant representing over a dozen different technology companies. Thank you guys for joining me today. Dr. Conner, can you give me some background on yourself and tell us a little bit about your background here in tech?
Thank you, Jared, for having me. Jacob, it's always a pleasure to join on a call with you anytime we get to talk education, AI. I just absolutely love it. But Jared, I started off and it is a unique pathology of how I got here with EdTech and AI. I started off as a fourth grade teacher, pretty much served in every single position in education: fourth grade teacher, literacy curriculum specialist, assistant principal, assistant superintendent teaching and learning, chief academic officer, and superintendent. In 2017, as a superintendent, I remember my mentor, Dr. Rudy Crew, former chancellor of New York City Public Schools and superintendent of Miami-Dade. He said, "What makes you different from the 17 other thousand superintendents across this country?" And I couldn't answer that question. That is when I said, okay, what could be the Superman that I can be able to add on to my professional repertoire? This is when I came across the business analytics program and enrolled. It was a year and a half program, multiple courses at Harvard University that focused on analytics, AI, various platforms and different technologies. It was a different language. I was one of two educators in that program. Then I continued at MIT to study innovation and technology. That's when I started to challenge the standard nodes of research, traditional practices of theory, with using or underscoring these analytical practices, this statistical modeling that never existed before. In my professional repertoire, I started applying those practices to my district strategic operating plan, where we were looking at different areas of descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics, predictive analytics with regards to our strategies and objectives based off the KPIs and historical data in my district. And I was like, wow, this is phenomenal. Then that's where now, when I'm with my corporation, I'm essentially interfacing two independent domains of education, research, and theory, and bringing that into this world of advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, and technology, and merging them to create a new learning ecosystem for our students. It's been fun to be able to engage in that, being able to engage with experts like you and Jacob from the EdTech side, and then being able to engage in research-based conversations as students are building their dissertation. It's like this paradox that I'm living in each day, by each minute and hour. This is the new direction and the new venture that we have to engage in education in order to stay on top of things, especially around the revolution of AI and technology.
Jacob, how do you compete with a doctorate and postdoctorate work at Harvard and MIT? Tell us more about yourself.
I got nothing in that bucket, but
Me either.
my journey, born in Ukraine, came over from the Soviet Union, settled in Los Angeles. I still remember my first day of school, not knowing a single word of English, crying all day. And the second day of school, being told, hey, you need to go to a different school because we don't have the support system set up at this school. For me, it was fine. You don't know any better when you're that young, but the fact that still stayed with me is a good story I point to really showcase that every student is on their own path and has a different way that they're going to learn, and has a backstory when they show up to school, being from a different country and literally not knowing anything about traditions, the language, any of that. My journey took me through LAUSD, and then during college, working for the district, graduating in peak recession time of 2007, getting lucky to work with McGraw-Hill as LAUSD was buying textbooks and then becoming a trainer with McGraw-Hill, taking my talent to C2 education, then going to Revolution Prep in the tutoring space before that was a thing during COVID, going over to CollegeWise as in the college counseling admission space, then being the first hire at Varsity Tutors as they were attempting to sell to districts and selling the first $5 million of deals there. A long journey of really figuring out how to work with schools, how to sell solutions into schools, and building relationships for the long term, and not just, hey, I have a quota to meet this quarter. Can this school help me hit this quota number? But really looking at it as, hey, every school, every administrator I work with, at the end of the day, I am trying to amplify the work that they're doing and make them the heroes in their communities for what they're doing with their students. And I've always kept that at the center of everything I do, where if I can make them look good, I don't need any credit. Working with me, I get the credit from my own organization. But if I can do that consistently over and over again, then anytime I have a neat solution or even want to run something by them, then they'll pick up the phone and respond. It's been a great journey. And for the last 2 years, strategically working in lots of different organizations, Stride K-12, which is the largest charter operator in the nation, and helping ASU GSV on the AI show, and working with OWL to do some strategic projects, and AIEDU to launch them in rural America, some in the special ed, some in the AI space, some in the tutoring space. It's been interesting to see all of the different solutions that are being built, and working closely with Dr. Conner, really trying to make larger impact, trying to have students have the same opportunities that I was able to have being an immigrant kid in this country, and really setting my own 6-year-old and 4-year-old up for a life that I didn't have as a kid.
You said something really interesting there, which was a textbook. What is that? Is that still around?
Yeah, at that time, districts every 7 years would buy science, and then they would buy math, and then they would buy ELA. And the project I was on with McGraw-Hill, right? LAUSD was buying language arts textbooks for every elementary school kid in the district. You're talking about 500 schools times the amount of kids at that school. So you're talking about a $30 million deal that was on the table, where I always loved this story. In 07, 08, this was pre-iPhone and pre-Garmin being so cheap, right? They were still $500 at that point. I used MapQuest every night, 4 nights a week, to make sure I was able to map my route. So that way I didn't spend 12 hours in the car, right? And I could get on the other side of LA quickly and make my progression through schools. Because if you didn't do that, and sometimes you would forget or you were tired, those days were terrible. You made it to 6 schools and you're like, lesson learned. I will always use MapQuest.
And now my car drives me to the meeting for me, which is very relaxing. Dr. Conner, what is the first thing you want educators to know about the advancement of technology in a school? What's something that stands out to you that you want to make everyone aware of?
That's a great question, Jared. I think besides the obvious cybersecurity around AI ethics, I think we have to be intentional with the intelligence systems that we adopt in our schools, ensuring that there is a true purpose to drive student outcomes, to drive this level of personalization. As Jacob stated, looking at every student as an individual and utilizing and underscoring that to provide them with a personalized learning program that suffice for their individual growth and whatever that growth might be. But I think that we need to be intelligent with that, because right now at the school-based level, we're seeing a lot of adoptions, right? Adoptions of new tools, new software, but again, being purposeful with that adoption, meaning what is the alignment, right? Using a hypothetical number, 48% of my students fall in that tier 2, tier 3 line. Specifically, I need to identify what is a strong reactive intelligence system that will provide that explicit pedagogy through the software, through the platform, that will assist in catching students up, right? If I know that I have new CTE pathways, or creating those new CTE pathways around careers that aren't even designed today, or even engineering from an AI standpoint, or If we're looking at aerospace and manufacturing, how am I going to identify the various mixed realities, the virtual realities to help prepare my students with these specific skill sets? I think that's one thing, being intentional with the various intelligence systems, but also knowing there's going to be a continuous evolution of artificial intelligence and various emerging technologies within our world. We have to continuously educate our families and educate our students with regards to ethical use of AI, but more importantly, how to protect our students with new AI being adopted within our schools and within our districts. I always say that now AI and technology is becoming the ubiquitous utility within our learning organizations and schools. We have to find ways to create that equilibrium. But again, I'm an outcomes guy, and I'm a person that believes in each and all being copious with what we're adopted in our classrooms and intentional.
How does schools keep up with this advancement of technology? Because everything is evolving so quickly. I've used Chat GPT today. I've used Copilot. How are schools possibly keeping up with this? Teachers that are already overworked, how are they managing these new systems and engaging them?
You have to have a leadership team, an executive leadership team that is dedicated to continuous learning and to be able to unpack and scaffold that learning within the organization so it becomes systematized with a level of coherence. There's a lot that our teachers and leaders are engaging in. We have to be able to stay on the cutting edge with these new technologies, information, and research around artificial intelligence. If we create this culture around continuous learning, a continuous learning mindset, we're able to disseminate and turnkey this information into practice as well. AI is going to be, every second it becomes outdated, right? But I think that if we stay ahead with the necessary social capital within the organization, we're able to keep our leaders and teachers abreast of the technologies in the classroom, as well as how to create that synergy with AI and human intelligence.
Jacob, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down, as we were talking about, like tools and getting students to use tools thoughtfully, but also administrators to start using tools and save them time. I always circle back to my own kids in LAUSD. I have a kinder, so he's quite young. I'm on the specific school's parent, principal, teacher board, so not the school board. But I like this story because I'm sitting in one of these meetings and they're talking about what PD should we do for the end of the year. We have 5 open slots that we're thinking about. And me, I said, was it worthwhile to tell you about what other schools are doing across the country? Hot button topics just off the top of my head, all things to do with cell phone bans and how do you keep kids on track. Also, all things around AI and how do you save teachers time and teacher burnout and all this stuff. You would have thought I was speaking a different language when I said AI. They looked at me and they were like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And I was like, you understand that you're spending hours grading papers at night, and I could give you 10 tools that tomorrow would cut that into no hours being so the struggle is real for sure. And some of that is new technology, similar to when the internet came and everybody was afraid of that, then the calculator came and everybody was afraid of that. I get it. There's a solution. And my wife knows how big of a nerd I am with all things AI. And I talk to her all the time about it, how I do proposals. I help schools learn about this and literacy. And the other day we're sitting at dinner and one of my coworkers used ChatGPT to plan their entire itinerary for Disneyland. They said, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and here's their weights and heights, and where can we go? And what should we do first? And we just did Disneyland for our son's birthday. She was like, it can do that for you. I had to take a step back and say, it's a use case thing. If somebody can actually use it and say, oh, this is what it can help me do and save time. But that learning for every single person, how do you amplify that by an entire district of 600,000 students and a huge amount of teachers and administrators? Dr. Conner and I battle all the time. How do you get the early adopters who are movers and shakers to get on the megaphone and say, hey, this is really helping. You guys should look at this. Dr. Conner and I were together this weekend. He was doing some PD in LA. And one of the things that we talked about was not enough folks in leadership positions that are superintendents, assistant superintendents, ever really amplify the solutions that didn't work. A lot of things got purchased during COVID. There were $200 billion in the system. Some of that was to try things. Fine. No worries. I sold many things during COVID. It was a Wild West. It is okay that they tried to implement some solutions that they thought were good that ended up being average or poor, to put it nicely. But the fact that we're not going back and auditing those and amplifying the things that didn't work is a real detriment, right? Because when a company, and I've been a part of many of them, when I sell my solution to Oakland, if it's good or bad for them, I still go tell the next district nearby that I work with Oakland and they use our solution. Not that it works or they hate it, they dropped it, they're suing us, whatever the situation is there. That is the social selling aspect of solutions into school. The loop being closed is not there right now. And I wish it was, because it would help all administrators really get great solutions versus just somebody emailed me that day and I actually was looking for XYZ solution for the kids and this sounded good. Really buying based on evidence and efficacy and true feedback about, is this going to solve what I'm looking to solve for students, teachers, myself?
Let's talk about custom lesson planning, because there's been talk about teachers teach to the lowest common denominator in class. Whether that's true or not, there's at least a perception of that. I've seen some AI tools that would allow teachers to customize their plan for each student, getting the accelerated students more challenges and the lower end students the extra help they need in a very specific area using data. What do you see in terms of trends for that?
That's a great question because again, that's where we want to move towards, right? I always say that the standardization or the analog processes and systems that we have, they have exacerbated two gaps. I always like to say the achievement gap and the acceleration gap, right? The acceleration gap is having students continue beyond, let's say, that standard grade level that has been articulated. But if you want to talk about from a practitioner standpoint, Jacob was highlighting that efficacy, efficiency of time, degree of accuracy and precision that the AI can generate based on the information or the prompts that we feed that specific system. Moreover, if we truly integrate AI into curriculum, it becomes a decentralized function where students have that personalization embedded in it with some of the traditional practices of the codified standards within our curriculum. I always like to reference this, Jared, and Jacob heard me say this many times, the story from 1985, Benjamin Bloom. Benjamin Bloom had a study called the Two Sigma study. And the Two Sigma study outlined that if we could get to a one-to-one tutoring level, achievement will improve by 2 standard deviations. Now, in 1985, they didn't have AI, didn't have technology. It was just people. So it would be pretty cost intensive for a district to hire more people to get to that level of one-to-one instruction, right? But now in 2025, we can call it the Two Sigma prosperity. There's no issue for us to get to that level of one-to-one tutoring that Benjamin Bloom outlined in 1985 because of technology, right? Now is how we're integrating technology into the fabric of our academic day, because not only can it decentralize curriculum to be more personalized for our students, but we can provide students with necessary acceleration, and teachers will have more time to devote to their students because the efficacy of time is being utilized through the use of AI, through lesson planning. That's BC stage of education before COVID. Now that we have AI, we should call it lesson designing because we're designing for our students in that one-on-one manner. I'm a huge proponent of integrating AI into the curriculum aspect of it, even to the lesson design, because we can get to that level of what I like to say zone of proximal development with human intelligence, the practitioner, the teacher, and artificial intelligence, the solution that has been identified.
Jacob, some of the concerns about AI I've heard are how do you know if it's real when it's then teaching the students? How do you know that they don't place Putin's head on Mount Rushmore instead of Teddy Roosevelt? Is that a real concern? Is hate or all these other things or false stuff about history? How do you know it's accurate in teaching the students?
Look, hallucinations are a thing in AI for sure, right? That everybody's battling. And we have to name it that some of the AI is also trained on the internet where there's a lot of negativity, false things, and hate. That's where the literacy side of the house is very important, right? I've seen some magical things with teachers where they're almost incorporating, hey, we're going to use ChatGPT in this homework. What you're going to do is prompt it, and you're going to tell me the prompts you used. Then you're also going to show me the end product, and then you're going to edit you personally, student, you're going to edit the work and find what was good and what was inaccurate, right? Showing the student what the tool could do and what the capabilities are, but still having a human in the loop. And I wish every single time that I used AI, I could just hit send and not worry about it, right? But it's really with the human in the loop to get to the bottom of what I'm looking to solve for. And same thing for students. Everybody's worried about cheating and students cheating and essays being written and all this stuff. Like cheating has been a thing since the dawn of time. Students are just now cheating in a different way. Instead of saying, hey, no, students, you're not allowed to use these tools that you'll be using in the rest of your life for your job, and hopefully they'll make you more productive. Why don't we use these in the right way? During my time in consulting, I worked with an organization called AIEDU. And I remember vividly meeting the founder, Alex, at ASU GSV. And this was pre-chat GPT. He was like, Jacob, we do AI literacy. Like, how do I get this in the hands of districts and schools? And at that time, I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You are literally talking over my head. I don't know how to help you. Fast forward 6 months later, ChatGPT launches. Everybody freaks out, good and bad. But then the next year, I attended an event with him. It was like night and day difference. He was the person in the middle with 30 superintendents surrounding him with people bringing him drinks. And I was like, I've never seen this. I've never seen that example ever in my 18 years of selling to K-12. It was such a hot topic and it just launched and that propelled them, right? Now they work with Google, Salesforce, and other organizations that help fund their work and get AI literacy to the masses. They're working with the state of Ohio and just did a conference in Anaheim. I think what they're doing is important. There's a lot of organizations like them too, right? Code.org and Amanda Biggerstaff at AI for Education. And there's a lot of people talking about literacy and how to make sure not just the students, but the staff are literate too. Because if you can train your staff, and Dr. Conner and I talk about this a lot. I was on calls earlier today with the Oregon Department of Ed. In Oregon, like in California, you have the LCAP and you have all these different reports that you have to report into the state level. In Oregon, superintendents and principals are responsible for 300 different reports that they have to report into. Imagine that situation, just taking a step back. That means that soup or that assistant soup or whoever's doing this becomes literally compliance. They are doing so much paperwork that like, imagine 300 separate 20, 30, 50 page, you're straight compliance. And what I heard recently, I spoke at the County Office of Ed conference. One of the County Offices of Ed there was like, I encourage my superintendents to get a C in compliance. If we get a C in compliance, we're doing what we need to do, working with kids and working with parents and working on the important stuff and not the, hey, are we compliant? That's very important. Some of the solutions out there, shout out to Patrick at Linwood Unified, right? One of the most forward tech assistant soups out there. He just won CTO of the year for all LA County. He looked at what was missing at the administrator level and said, I'm spending a lot of time helping my superintendent do board doc prep or prepping for the questions or HR level work or what are we doing for all of this stuff? I'm going to use AI and I'm going to build the 30 different use cases for HR, for the board that meets, for my hiring practices, for evaluations, for you. Imagine in that situation how much time he saved all of his staff that normally would be spending hours and hours doing tedious tasks.
I want to pick up there in 2 points. One, teachers and particularly administrators, I'm hearing from both of you, this should be a time-saving tool. like it is for the rest of us?
Not only just time, effectiveness as well. And we always want to improve the degree of effectiveness within our classrooms, improve the quality, defining quality for our teachers. And yes, we're saving time for our teachers, but the implicit is we're building effective practices around improving the quality of instruction.
That's a great point. Jacob had mentioned the use and advancement of ChatGPT, which is the one that's gotten all the headlines that people are using. I was talking to a chancellor of the Contra Costa Community Colleges recently, and she was saying 2 years ago when this came out, everybody was laughing at it. Now they have to incorporate it because they know their students are using it to write most of their papers. Jacob, you were talking about how in K-12, where it's got to be even harder to keep up with these changes, I've got to imagine the kids are trying to use it. How do you use that? Dr. Conner, as an educator, build on what Jacob was talking about. How can educators account for kids using not just ChatGPT, but other tools?
It goes back to what Jacob stated earlier. Plenty of conversations around this too, is AI literacy, right? We have to be able to build the literacy and the capabilities of our students to not use these tools in an unethical manner. And I talked to Jacob about this again. Remember when I asked students across the country, I remember being at a New York summit and they were talking about how sometimes they're not using Chat GPT to cheat. I remember one student said, "Hey, I use Chat GPT the way my mother used it. She uses it to help generate ideas for reports and to be able to make modifications and changes based off the ideas that the generative platform generated for the outputs." In essence, we do see some students using it for cheating purposes, but we need to ensure we're building their capabilities to use it effectively. And I think that we need to be able to be intentional of what that human capital or what the human capital exercises are for our students and teachers simultaneously. I always like to say we have to differentiate instruction for our students. We also have to differentiate instruction around capabilities with our practitioners and students simultaneously.
Jacob, any other thoughts on that?
I think this dynamic of, and I lived this in my own household, right? I've been talking to my wife about AI for going on 2.5 years and her looking at me like I was crazy. But I do think the kind of intentional conversation around AI is like, some people are associating it with the Terminator and Starlink and death to humans. And you're like, actually, we've been using Siri and we've been using Alexa and we've been using GPS mapping and we've been like, this stuff has been around for a long time. I was recently on with Steve Shapiro from Fine-Tune, and I didn't know his background. We met at a conference, but I've been working on AI for 10 years. And like, I've been friends with Sam Altman for literally 15 years as he was starting to think about AI. And I was like, oh man, I need to learn from you. It's not new. It's just new to the masses and the tools that can make our lives easier every day. One quick shout out to Christopher Huang at Los Angeles County Office of Ed. At the conference that I spoke at, he was in the audience and we were doing some Q&A afterwards. One of the things he said is to the group of county superintendents over massive amounts of kids, right? We have 6 million kids in the state. He said, if you're giving a tool to the teacher and the teacher now saves an hour or 2 hours a day, if you keep adding more stuff on that teacher's plate because you just gave them a tool to save 2 hours, that is not saving them time. That is giving them more work and to hopefully be more efficient. And what he named it, he said, hey, if you're saving the teacher time, the teacher will have many other things to do than to sit at the computer or do these other things, right? So if you're truly using AI as a time saver, let that person gain that time back for whatever they need to do. And if it's not school related, if it's for their health, if it's for their family, if it's making dinner, if it's picking up dry cleaning, that is a good use of saving time, buying yourself time back for the things that we do every day outside of work.
And I want to hit on something Dr. Conner had said in there is a student using an AI tool, if they're using it in a productive way, but they're still creating the problem, then that's okay. And we don't cheat in the real world. And I'll give you an example. I was working on a presentation for a conference in PowerPoint, and I wrote a script out in Word. Okay, actually, I used Siri to talk the script up. Then I threw the script through Grammarly to say, clean this up, make it more professional. And then I spent a half an hour and I edited that script. But then I said to AI, make this into a PowerPoint presentation. That PowerPoint was one of my best ones, covered a lot of the topics, was more concise, and probably saved me 2 hours or 3 in that whole process. That is a student leveraging tools the same way they will in their profession.
I agree with you. On my end, as I work across a lot of different tech solutions and different verticals, an example, right, of building a presentation and the tools that are out there, I would literally spend a week building a presentation for a school that I was used to Keynote for. That could not have been a good use of my week that a company was paying me for. Yes, it was a necessary item for me to do my job, but that was not a good use of that company's investment in me or even my brain power. I think we're all capable of significantly more if we could take some of the tedious tasks that we do day in and day out and really automate them.
I want to hit on a negative of AI in here and get some advice. One of the big headlines has been bullying related to AI, taking their pictures, actually videoing them secretly while they're walking down the hall and putting them on naked bodies, along with other things. There are negatives to AI. How do schools combat the specific I'm talking about? But also, there are other negatives in terms of bullying using AI and social media. Dr. Conner, any thoughts on how schools can use technology or get ahead of some of that stuff to manage it?
I think districts have already started implementing safeguards, right? With AI, districts are adopting hardware and infrastructure to mitigate that. Jacob talked about it earlier, right? Now they're putting safeguards with regards to cell phones. A lot of the cyberbullying that was being experienced in schools were done through social media and then also included during the academic day as well, using different platforms and communication services. Jacob didn't realize that students were using Signal to communicate for fights. These are some of the new evolutions we're discovering within our schools, but I think schools are now taking the necessary prevention and intervention mechanisms and methods in order to curtail that. I think that now we have to be, as parents, because I'm a parent of a 9-year-old, all of us are parents of Generation Alpha, the generation I say that are going to change the world. Betas are going to make sure they're going to finish it off what Generation Alpha didn't do, what we couldn't do. But in essence, with that, I think we got to be more intentional and we have to be more diligent on how we're safeguarding AI at home with our own kids. I think that is going to be a next step for us. What does that look like? I remember my son, he was talking to another kid, didn't know anything about the kid, perfectly fine. But as an example, we have to be able to protect our kids because you could have these individuals who want to do harm to our kids, disguise their voice using AI, have them meet up, talk to them on different platforms and all that. We have to be able to monitor that and safeguard that. I think schools have taken the necessary steps to put the necessary hardware and infrastructure in to do that, and policies.
I have a solution provider that I'm doing some work on. I think they are at the forefront of thinking about this idea of, yes, cell phones are an issue in the classroom, right? The distraction level, the learning side of the house, you name it, right? But try to take away a phone from a kid and see what kind of fight that you're going to have with that student as a teacher. Also, try to take away a phone and try to see what kind of fight you're going to have with a parent, because unfortunately, we do live in America where there are quite a lot of school incidents that are tragic and they break my heart. And I don't see that getting any better. I live in Los Angeles with the fires that were going on. Fires broke out, and imagine a parent trying to reach a kid at Pacific Palisades High School when the fire is going out and you got to coordinate where you're meeting them to pick them up and the roads are like nightmare scenarios. This idea of, is there a solution out there where the kid steps into school and their phone becomes a dummy phone instead of a smartphone, where you can still have a parent reach their student, but they can't go on social media. They can't use their camera on their phone. They can't record a fight at school. The technology in a phone is very sophisticated now, where before you would not have a 48 megapixel camera in your pocket, right? And if there's a fight, what happens? There's 30 kids standing around filming it. And then that night, that fight is on the news from the student's perspective, filming it.
I've heard parents going back to flip phones and for their kids for that purpose, or just doing the watch so they could still track them and everything else. What advice do both of you want to leave to educators and parents about tech? Jacob first and then Dr. Conner.
I would say, similar to where we started, a lot of the orgs I'm working with, I'm really pushing them to think about efficacy and how they can show the data around the claims that they're making. Oh, we improved math scores. How? You improve literacy. How? Because the days are long gone of a district taking somebody's word for it and saying, yeah, you look like you're wearing a nice watch and a nice suit and nice shoes. We'll trust you. That's gone, right? Like in today's time of all the things going on with money going into districts and ESSER being gone, it's really, they have to lead with, here's the data and efficacy, and here's what we're seeing from other schools and districts like yours. We're not saying we're going to see the exact same thing as what we're seeing there, but if we work together, you better believe that we're trying to move the needle for kids. And here's what we've seen in the past. Do you want to work together? Leading with that and really trying to solve genuine needs versus a shiny object looks great and then actually does no real impact.
Dr. Conner?
Yeah, this is the educator in me, and we have to ensure that we still incorporate the voices of our students and of our families authentically around this whole notion of AI implementation and what this looks like contextually for a district. I think that we have a lot of great conversations at this level, right? A lot of great conversations at the executive level. But are we having these transparent conversations and including our families and our students, their voice to be a part of the design and the solution, right? When we talk about problem solving and identifying solutions, our most important customers, families and students, need to be involved in that process as well. I keep encouraging educators across the world that it's not just us talking. We love to hear us talk high level, use an acronym, big words that a lot of our families and students don't understand, but we need to include them. This is a time to not disenfranchise, but more in the time to pull in and say, hey, we're all in this together right now. How do we solve in order to make sure AI is incorporated into our schools appropriately?
And Dr. Conner, you have your own technology and lesson planning tools. Do you want to mention that briefly and where people can find out more?
I have created a very broad change management platform for continuous improvement. It's called the Agile Diagnostic and AI Platform, and it uses AI and advanced analytics to target next steps to move districts toward the 22nd century. I say the 22nd century education model because of the learners in front of us, Generation Alpha, the generative natives, and Generation Beta, the quantum natives. When you talk about efficacy of time, efficiency of time within the classroom, with regards to lesson planning, think about it as a big lesson planner at the district level, where we're saving a lot of time to identify different strategies, new workflows to integrate into our systems. We are right now, we're across the United States. We just leveraged a few new partnerships that I'm very happy about. Jacob was talking about the 12.5% of the early adopters. We're looking for the early adopters and the 2.5%, which are the extreme innovators who really want to move their district in alignment to the 22nd century ecosystem. The Agile Diagnostic AI Platform got highlighted as one of the leading EdTech innovations by Damon John at Black Entrepreneurs Day in Atlanta. We have a unique partnership with T-Mobile where they provide the device and created an integrated IoT hub where now the Agile platform lives at. It's truly R&D added in the elements of AI and analytics. This was a creation, I like to say, it's like FUBU. Remember FUBU, for us, by us? I always like to say this tool is for leaders by leaders.
And where do people learn more about you or about that product?
Yes, you can learn more about the Agile Diagnostic and AI platform at our website, www.agileevolutionarygroup.com.
And Jacob, how do people find out more about you?
I'd say LinkedIn is probably the best place to catch me. Forewarning to anybody out there who adds me on LinkedIn, I'm very active. So you'll see me all day long, never ending stream of all things EdTech, all things policy, all things what's going on in the classroom or at the state level. And there's a changing ecosystem of things, and AI is really moving at very fast speed. I try to make sure I'm looking at every tool that's out there, every solution that could be of benefit to educators. Would love to connect on LinkedIn. One plug that Dr. Conner didn't give himself was he also is an international speaker now. So he's speaking in Vietnam, he's speaking in Dubai, he's speaking all over the world. It's always neat to follow along on his journey as he's stepped away from the superintendent role and found himself as an innovator in the space that's helping others really craft their own policies, but also think about how to educate students differently.
I don't want to. Those sound like fun places to explore. Thank you guys both for being here today. I really appreciate this.
Good to be with you.
Absolutely, Jared.
Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Asch, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.